This podcast is part of the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Podcast Network. Go to michigansportsandentertainment.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to MSE Countdown with your host, David Rosenberg and Chase Sussex. The countdown starts now.
Hey everybody, welcome to the MSE Countdown. We are back. I am your host, David Rosenberg. I'm here with Chase Sussex. Chase, what's up?
Yo, how's it going, everybody?
All right, so we are back. We had an extended hiatus of sorts. You guys can blame that one solely on me. I had a lot of internet troubles. We had never had a problem recording, and we went to record one day, and my Wi-Fi decided it was no longer strong enough to support what it is that we were doing. So after much delay, I got an Ethernet cord. I'm here in my living room. I'm taking up my entire apartment to do this. So we are back at all costs. Chase, what have you been up to in the past couple of weeks? We haven't talked.
Yeah, it's been a while since we recorded, but I mean, there's been a lot of exciting to talking about, and I know there's been a lot of stuff that's happened since we've been gone, and we're sorry for kind of being out of the loop, but I'm telling you guys, we're going to be right on top of action all throughout the summer. You guys are going to get all kinds of news from us here on the podcast. I know there's been a lot of things that have kind of happened while we were on a little bit of a hiatus here. We actually got a new intro made. You'll hear that at the beginning of the episode. Thank you to Jason Cathy for that intro. Awesome intro there for the podcast. So that's a little bit something
shout out to Jason. We appreciate that. I knew we were missing something, and I'd say, if anything, the silver lining of that hiatus would be that intro music, Chase.
Absolutely. So I am ready to dive right in. Are you ready to jump into the news this week?
Yeah, I think so. Let's get it going. The countdown starts now. So our first story, this is about a week old, but I think we would be a terrible Michigan sports and entertainment podcast if we didn't address what has happened at the University of Michigan. Coach John Beilein has left for the NBA. He is no longer the head coach at the University of Michigan. He is now the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Surprising many. Chase, this came out about a week ago. You've had some time to digest. What have you heard about this story, and what are your overall thoughts?
When this news first broke, this was a crazy story for me. It was just so weird to kind of hear that John Beilein was leaving Michigan. I mean, it didn't sound like he had any plans the program. I mean, he had a great foundation set up. Recently just had 3 players leave for the NBA. I mean, had, a great program, has been running, they were a Final Four team last year. They made it to the Sweet 16 this year. Absolutely great program. And he just out of the blue, he decided to leave for the NBA. And it strikes as a surprise just because he's one of the most committed coaches, I think, to college basketball and the jump ship after showing almost no interest in coaching in the NBA, jumping ship so quick. I mean, it kind of hit everyone by surprise. I don't really think anyone really ever thought about it. There were a bunch of rumors going around that he was unhappy with how the NCAA has been. There's been a lot of rumors about the fact that coaches are getting sick of the whole one and done thing, and with the new rule that's going to be implemented where kids are going to be able to jump from high school to straight to the pros is definitely damaging some of the abilities that the coaches are going to have in terms of availability to the top prospects.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong though, that you view this as damage, as a culmination of the damage that has been done to the NCAA and college basketball as a whole, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people, I saw, a couple articles released when it happened. I mean, one of the darkest days in NCAA history. And that's honestly a true statement. I mean, like I said, John Beilein was one of the most committed coaches to NCAA basketball. I mean, he's been around in the league for the longest time, probably one of the most successful coaches ever to coach at Michigan. And
he's at Michigan for 12 years?
Yeah, 12-something years, and for him to just jump ship so quick without any explanation. I get losing 3 of your top players at the NBA, but you had so many good prospects coming in, and it was hard for me to understand. And there must have been something crazy that happened internally in the NCAA that caused him to pack his bag so quickly, especially after so much success with the program.
Yeah, well, let me say this. Okay, so you've talked a lot about You mentioned the Final Fours and stuff. He's been a winning coach, yes, but has he won the championship recently?
I mean, it hasn't been a recent championship win, but I feel like this team was really close. I mean, I think it was a big blow for Beilein's team when.
But at
it
a
came
certain
to...
point, doesn't being second in the state, to become, laborious? Wouldn't you welcome the job? If I remember correctly, last year he took an interview with the Detroit Pistons and was the presumed second option after Dwayne Casey was hired. There was some interest. So I know he's been loyal for, let's say, the first 10 years of his career, but recently it seems like he might not have been as loyal as you're saying he is.
Well, I think more of anything last, I feel like he was just more testing the waters. At least that was my thought at the time. He was doing his due diligence in the fact that he was just testing the waters over in the NBA and just seeing there were jobs that he was interested in. And there were rumors out saying that he, didn't really get the right offer from the team he was looking for. And this year when the Cavs came calling, it was a job he couldn't pass up. So I think it was just an issue. Clearly that we missed out is the fact that he just didn't get the right offer last year, and that's why he just decided to stay in college.
But he would have taken the offer from the Pistons if they didn't give it to Dwayne Casey. They never offered.
Yeah, so it's quite a possibility we could have seen him stay in the state of Michigan last year, and he wouldn't even led that team to the Sweet 16 last year. He wouldn't have coached that team. So it's definitely pretty interesting to wonder. I wouldn't necessarily be curious about his loyalty to the team, but I think just his unhappiness with the NCAA as a whole and just how things have been. And I think that just is upsetting because of how committed a coach like that was to the program and to the sport. So for him to just kind of, go to the pros was just such a surprise.
I know I'm giving you a little bit of a hard time about this, but in all fairness, you do make a really good point. Coach Beilein, like we said, was there for over a decade. He was one of those staple coaches, right, in college basketball, and now he's no longer there, and that does hurt the entire NCAA, and it does definitely speak to how the game is changing and how one-time maybe loyal coaches are no longer seeing the upside of staying in the NCAA and against taking a pro contract. So you do make a good point there. It's concerning for sure, but with March Madness and college basketball, we'll always be alive. This isn't the end, obviously, for the NCAA, but it's definitely can be probably looked back on in the future as a big shifting point.
Absolutely.
Speaking of shifts, the University of Michigan is now going to go through some sort of a shift. I know they talk a lot about the culture that John Beilein created, and they probably want to maintain that. I know a lot of fans have been saying, we'd really like for a Brad Stevens or a Billy Donovan to leave their jobs and come to coach Michigan. That's Jim Harbaugh did it for the football program, I guess, but that's not going to happen. So the names involved now, people like Juwan Howard, who do you see? I know he's taking a meeting with them. Who do you see as the viable candidates to take the job?
I've seen Juwan Howard as pretty much the lead candidate pretty much throughout the entire process. I've seen some names kind of thrown around. I've seen Yaklich, their assistant coach, if they want to stay kind of within the program. But I just don't really think that Michigan would necessarily stay inside the program necessarily. Not discrediting anything that Luke Yaklich has done as the assistant coach for the Wolverines, but it's just one of those things where I think they're looking for one of those big splash hires that can continue to maintain the culture at Michigan.
And that's promoting from within also tends to hurt.
It does, yeah.
It's you have this idea of the king is dead, so who gets the throne, and that's not really what it's supposed to be. Have a new person come in and kind of either choose to change things up or continue the culture, and they can choose to keep the staff or bring in their own.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've kind of noticed, a lot of mixed feelings about the Juwan Howard hire, because as much as a hometown guy as Howard is, a lot of people just kind of fear he doesn't.
Potential hire.
Yeah, potential hire. I'm not saying that he's officially it's not an official hire or anything yet, but the potential hire of Juwan Howard, I know a lot of people are kind of iffy about it because he has a lack of high school connections. I know one thing that Beilein had in his time as Michigan is connections to, recruiting and kids in high school.
Well, Beilein worked his way up, and that's actually something
exactly.
we didn't talk about in our earlier discussion. He worked his way up, so I always thought that the NBA was a natural progression for him. He's been an elite coach at every level. Why not become an elite coach at the highest level? But yeah, you're right. He doesn't have those connections. But is that, with a name like Michigan and having the connection to Michigan that Juwan Howard has, does the lack of high school connections really matter?
I wouldn't necessarily say, because I think you can build connections. It's not one of the hardest things to do is to build connections like that. I don't really think, it'll be too tough for him to kind of get acquainted to some of the recruiting, but I think it's just going to be tough. And I think we've already seen that already. I kind of want to transition a little bit because we've actually seen Jalen Wilson, who is a small forward for Michigan, actually decommit. He requested a return of his letter of intent to the University of Michigan, and he is going to look to commit elsewhere at least the time. He hasn't officially declared that he is done with Michigan, but it does look like he's going to sign somewhere else. There's been a lot of rumors that he might go to Kansas, and he's also visited with North Carolina. But it's definitely a big blow to the program. I know the small forward position is one that lacks a lot of depth. They do still have Cole Bajima. He is still committed at the small forward position, so that would be good. But Isaiah Livers is realistically the only decent small forward they have on the roster right now after Charles Matthews leaving for the NBA. So depth is going to be a big issue for the Michigan Wolverines next year, especially at shooting guard. They really don't have anyone. They have Eli Brooks after Jordan Poole left. They've got Adrian Nunez, who could probably step up at the small forward position, but I still think entering as a sophomore next year, I just don't think he'll be ready, especially with the coaching change. It's going to be tough for him to kind of step up into the position. So I think the coaching change here is going to be a really big issue for Michigan on all ends. I think they're going to have a down year next year considerably after losing, all three, big three starters from last year. I mean, you got Charles Matthews leaving for the NBA, Jordan Poole, and then Iggy Brazdeikis is kind of one of those on the line. He's kind of like on the rocks type.
I know he's going to be meeting with teams next week, and I think working at some camps.
Yeah. So I mean, if anything, I feel like if the Beilein situation, him leaving the university, kind of ruins any chance of Brazdeikis coming back to the university, which is unfortunate. But he hasn't completely ruled it out. I know he's been in interviews saying that he hasn't ruled out a return to Michigan because he described Michigan as such a hard program to give up because it's such a, what am I trying to say? The culture, that's what I'm trying to think of. The culture there that Beilein created and they're looking to maintain is so good, it's so hard to give up.
Yeah, there's a passion amongst the players and
exactly,
the coaches that are there at the University of Michigan, and it means something to wear the blue and yellow or the maize and blue. It's going to be tough for them to keep Brazdeikis, and I think you covered it pretty thoroughly. There's a lot of depth issues. So aside from their coaching position being their top issue, they need to also fill out things. So if you predict that they're going to have a down year, I'm okay with that prediction, but I'll leave it with this caveat. When you give a team like Michigan the presumption that it's going to be a down year, I feel like they surprise you, or at least they tend to surprise you. So if they go on a big run, at least to start the season, I would not be shocked. But ultimately, I don't think next year is they're not going to be there at the end of March Madness or anything like that.
I mean, that's a good prediction. I mean, they do still have a lot of swagger on that. I know there's a lot of confident players. Isaiah Livers will be step into that starting role next year. Xavier Simpson is still on that team, that strong leader. He'll probably become the team captain next year after Charles Matthews leaves. You still have a strong center presence in John Teske. Colin Castleton comes off the bench at center as well. So, some bright futures there. You got like we said, if Cole Bajima stays, I mean, that'll definitely be someone to watch next year. They do have some good prospects there. I'm not saying that the depth is terrible, but the bench did struggle last year, and hopefully they put in enough work to possibly still be somewhat of a contender next year. But I feel like it's going to be hard. I feel like with the struggles this year against Michigan State, I feel like it's not going to be any easier. And that conference play, the Big Ten being such a tough conference, it's not going to get any easier for the Michigan Wolverines next year.
Yeah, speaking of those struggles with Michigan State, what's a win? Like, what can be considered a success as a season for Michigan next year? Is it taking one from Michigan State?
That's definitely a possibility.
Winning the series, if there is
a
series.
Yeah, I mean anything. I think winning this. If they could continue the way they've been playing, they can hope. I don't really think it's a team. They're necessarily a team that misses out in the tournament. It's quite a possibility, but I feel like their seed will definitely be much. Will be considerably lower than it was last year. But I think. Honestly, I think just bringing in a new coach and still having a somewhat successful season, I feel like that's still a success in my eyes. It's just really, getting somewhere like, third-ish in the Big Ten wouldn't be terrible. Picking up a win over Michigan State, possibly even, winning the series, winning 2 of the 3 games that they play, that would be a huge win in my book, really. I mean, for that program who's gone through so much adversity and roster changes, I think there's a lot of ways you could sort of win. I feel like maybe the team has a chance to surprise us, but I think it's going to be somewhat of a long season next year.
For sure. Any more thoughts on Michigan before we move on to our second story?
I think that's it. Yeah, let's move on.
All right, cool. Story number 2: the Detroit Tigers suck.
Yeah, that's about the best summary we can think of for the Tigers. I mean, they've just been so bad.
Good, man. I mean, I know you're not the biggest baseball fan, but I'm sure it's hard to be affiliated with a Detroit sports network and then not hear the constant groaning of the Michiganders. It's just they're not playing good baseball, and I don't think they were expected to play good baseball this year. But it seems Anthony Fennick, a beat writer for the Tigers for the Free Press, wrote an article last Friday about just how badly the Tigers are playing and how the fans don't deserve it. And it was critically acclaimed. I know some people took issue with it, but it was a really good article. So I'm going to give him a free plug and tell you to check that out if you can, and give him a follow on Twitter because he's a great resource for Tigers news. But just, man, like, the season, I guess, has built up to this because I actually wrote in one of Michigan Sports and Entertainment's article the other day about how this 500 team that the Tigers have been is not the Tigers team that we were supposed to get as Tigers fans.
No, yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't really think it's all. There have been a lot of injuries, I know, especially to the rotation. You had Michael Fulmer was pretty much ruled out at the beginning of the year. He had Tuck John surgery, if I'm not mistaken. He's out for the season. I mean, you got Matt Boyd and Spencer Turnbull are really your only consistent starters right now due to injury in your bullpen.
Jordan Zimmerman is down for an extended period of time. Matt Moore started off okay on the season, which is something that I didn't necessarily expect, and he went down. So you're right. Boyd is the ace, and thank God he's been pitching like an ace. A lot of people think that he's going to be trade bait come July, August, the later months of the summer, and that's probably true, but he's the best kind of trade bait because he's getting hot at the beginning of the season, and that's what people are going to look at. He's been fantastic, but that's definitely not enough. You got guys like Spencer Turnbull behind him who, interestingly enough, in his last start, I believe, against the White Sox, he gave up 7 runs in his 4 innings. Only one of those was earned because of an error. So it's just like that kind of sloppy play. You can imagine going to a game where there's only 1 earned run, yet the score is now 7-0 or 7-1. That's disheartening for not only a franchise but its fans. So Tigers fans have a legitimate gripe. I'm being a little harsh by saying that the Tigers suck. They're only, I believe, 4 or 5 games under 500 as we speak. but you're definitely right. That pitching, the crippled pitching core is really, really killed Detroit this year. Any other thoughts on the Tigers before I get into it?
Oh yeah, I really do want to address. I mean, I know their pitching has been dealt with a lot of injuries, but I think one of the biggest things that we kind of struggle with is the hitting. I mean, they don't really have any excuses in the offensive side of the ball. There haven't really been too many injuries. I feel like there's just not much impact going on there. I mean, I know a lot of their batters are just having a down year. I know they sent Candelario down to the minor leagues,
quote unquote, to find himself.
To find himself, yes.
What does that mean?
I don't know what that means, but they called up Dawa Lugo from AAA.
He's been good.
Yeah, he's been good. He's played well. He had a home run in his debut, which is really impressive. Speaking of debuts, I know you want to talk
way off. The Tigers are 8 games back from 500.
8 games back. Oh my goodness.
Go ahead.
But I know, speaking of debuts, I know you want to talk about Gregory Soto, and how he started a little rocky in his MLB, first MLB games.
Yeah, so Gregory Soto is an interesting story, right? He's 24 years old, and he's worked his way up into the majors, and he's had, he's faced some adversity, as most athletes do, but his entire family was at his debut game, where he got rocked and gave up 7 runs in 4 innings. And the quote he gave after the game was, "Well, I knew my family was going to be late, so I had to make sure I stayed in the game." I don't know if 7 runs is the way to stay in the game, but he did, and that's a sweet story. So I'm glad his family got to see him, even though he did get rocked. But in his 3 games, he's 0-2 with a 10.8 ERA. I know you had mentioned before we started recording that you had seen something with a 13 ERA. I don't doubt that for a second. It's been rough for Gregory Soto, but you mentioned these pitching injuries, and he's a product of that. He probably is, he definitely is not ready based on these statistics and his performance. And he's just being rushed into the role because the Tigers have no good options other than him. So it's tough, but I think he's, based on that quote, I think he's taking it for what it is. It's an opportunity, and he can only improve. He can't get worse. You know what I mean? Like, if it ballooned to a 20 ERA, everyone would just say, I saw this coming. If he drops it down to a sub-3 ERA, everyone's going to be impressed. So, best of luck to Gregory Soto, but it has been rough, to say the least, for him through at least his first 3 appearances.
All right, so is that all you wanted to bring up about the Tigers?
Yeah, pretty much. There's really not much to talk. They're starting a series tonight with the Marlins, the Miami Marlins, so that is, of course, close to me. I live in Orlando. I was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, so there's your little history on me for the day, but I grew up going to Marlins and Tigers games whenever I could because I've always been a Tigers fan. But it's funny, I believe the last Marlins-Tigers game I went to was the end of the season, maybe in 2016, and I think Henderson Alvarez no-hit the Detroit Tigers. Miggy was benched that day, so I'm not going to chalk that one up to him. But you did mention hitting, and Miguel Cabrera has been hitting well. He's 292, and he's finally barreling the ball. He's been getting some strong hits, but now he's finding gaps, so that is something that is positive to look at when you talk about the Tigers. And as always, Casey Mize is a stud. He's the number 6 prospect in the entire MLB. So it's only a matter of time until we see him. Give it a year, he'll be the next Justin Verlander. So don't worry, hang in there, Tigers fans. We're going to get through this. But yeah, for now, that's all I got, Chase.
All right, so we're actually going to transition to something a little bit different that we don't usually do. We haven't actually done this before. We're actually going to cover an entertainment section this week because I know there's been a lot of news going on. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen all over my Twitter feed, I'm not super into this, but I know a bunch of people have been freaking out about this, is Game of Thrones. Are you a big Game of Thrones guy, David?
I am. I love Game of Thrones. I actually, funny enough, we are recording on a Monday. We will hopefully get this up on a Tuesday, I believe. But so last night, the series finale of Game of Thrones aired, and I am a big wrestling fan. We will get into that in a bit, but the Money in the Bank pay-per-view was on last night as well. So I was torn between watching Money in the Bank and Game of Thrones series finale. I know both of those are delayable, as long as you avoid spoilers. But I had to make a decision, and I chose to sleep. I fell asleep during the first hour of the wrestling show, and I completely missed Game of Thrones. But luckily, I woke up at 6:30 this morning, and I caught the Game of Thrones series finale. And I do have thoughts on that, but I'm not going to go into it for spoiler's sake. But it's fair to say, yes, Chase, I am into Game of Thrones. Do you have any particular questions, or do you just want me to address all that has been Twitter and Game of Thrones?
I've seen a lot of backlash about a lot of the ways that the final season was handled. As not a huge fan of Game of Thrones, I'm not as surprised. I am a little bit surprised because of how big the show is. I know it's hard to please 18 million plus people, or however many people watch the show. I know they get a crazy amount of viewers every week, but I know as shows go on, 3
billion people watch Game of Thrones, I would not bat an eye. I would not doubt you. So you can say whatever number you want. I'm going to believe you on this.
And, it's pretty crazy, but I think, a lot of shows, it happens. Absolutely fantastic. And as the show goes along, you add more seasons. People start to, complain about the quality of the show, and the writing starts to go a little bit downhill. But I feel like with Game of Thrones, it hasn't really happened until this final season. A lot of people have been really split on the final season of Game of Thrones. So I'm just a little bit confused on where that's coming from. As so many people I've seen so devoted to the series, I see a lot of people who are still really happy with how the show ended and are upset that the show is going away. But what's the deal with all the people being upset?
Yeah. Okay. So actually, it's funny because what I do every week is I watch Game of Thrones unless I'm visiting home for some reason, and I call my mom the next day as I'm driving home from work, and we debrief and we talk about it. And all this season we've just been talking about, did you see on Twitter all of that crap that people were talking? And we kind of came to this, or at least I came to this conclusion, that there's really 3 types of people right now on Twitter that are talking about Game of Thrones. So the first kind is me. I'm happy with it. I loved it. I thought it was great. Yes, I thought there were parts that could be improved, but it's been a great show that has, captivated me for years, so I have no complaints. The second kind of person is probably who you're talking about. The troll on Twitter who is attacking everything from the water bottle that was left in the last episode of the 8th season, or the Starbucks cup that was left in one of the earlier episodes of the season, or just completely bashing the writing and completely, signing those. I'm sure you've seen the petition that million or whatever people have signed to rewrite rewrite the season with competent writers. And that stuff is just, those people. They're just there. They like to complain. I'm trying to keep this clean and not say swear words. They just like to complain for the sake of complaining. And it's tough to really understand where they're coming from, because it's just irrational, right? They're upset. It's almost as if if you told a child who loves Barney that Barney was ending, and a child can't conceptualize that, so they throw a tantrum. Twitter is the tantrum, okay? So that's the second kind of person. You should ignore them. And then the third kind of person is the educated fan who read all of the books, who is really invested in the series and all of the lore, which I am part of, but I'm not as deep as some people, who have serious concerns that a lot of the storylines for their favorite characters weren't paid off. And if you're one of those people, here's my message to you. It sucks, and I'm sorry. That's it. There's no, you didn't, you had, I have heard some absolutely magnificent fan theories, some things that have been said or predicted. They've intertwined things from the past seasons that say it's all pointing to this, and it makes sense, and it's beautiful. It really is. It's great. It's an art that I can appreciate. But you were wrong. That's simply it. What you thought mattered did not matter, okay? And that's the point of a good show, in my opinion. It kept you thinking that every little thing was super important, and when that happens, yes, some of them aren't going to get paid off. So maybe this is just me coming as a wrestling fan, and as wrestling fans, we naturally are predicting everything 6 months or a year ahead, and when they don't pay off 70% of the time, you can really just say, oh, shucks, and move on. So maybe I'm just more used to it, but really, I think people got too invested in it and, are throwing less of a tantrum than the person who is just throwing a tantrum for the sake of arguing. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I completely understand.
That's where I think all of that is coming from. That being said, I really enjoyed Game of Thrones, and I know I keep coming back to wrestling, but it's really nice to see a storyline pay off, over 8 seasons. And I know not all the storylines were paid off, but most of them were, and it was pretty cool. There were some happy endings, and there were some not so happy endings, and maybe some people were delusional and thought that this was a show all about happy endings, and it's definitely not. And it's definitely not supposed to happen the way you think it's going to happen. So if you're upset that something didn't go the way you wanted, move on. And if you're legitimately upset about the writing, I'm sorry they rushed the season. Hopefully there's a movie. Speaking of movies.
Oh, yeah, we want to dive right into that. Thank you, David, for your kind of Game of Thrones. But I want to transition a little bit into with the highs in the movies, and then we'll kind of go into a little bit of the lows and some of the controversy there. But I want to start off with probably one of the biggest highs that we've seen in movies so far, and that's Avengers Endgame. We're going to keep it spoiler free just for anyone who hasn't seen the movie. I know it's still fairly new; it's still in theaters, so we're not going to say any spoilers. But I know you saw Avengers Endgame, and I saw it as well. I mean, fantastic movie.
Yes.
I do have a couple of small criticism, small pieces of criticism here and there. I don't really like how long the movie was. I had an issue with the length of the movie.
I've heard a lot of people say that.
And there's just a lot of unnecessary parts. I feel like the first part of the movie, while it was good setup, I feel like there was a lot that they could have left out. A lot of it felt extra, and the first part of the movie, I feel like it was a little bit anticlimactic. That's the second and third part of the movie. The second 2/3 of the movie, fantastic, great parts of the movie, really good. I wouldn't have really changed much with the end of the movies, but I think there was a lot of filler in the beginning. A lot of the setup was a little excessive, and I just felt like there were scenes that we really just didn't need to see. It was just to me, it was a little bit extra. But overall, I thought it was a great way to sort of end this saga of the Avengers, and it was a really good ending point. I mean, I remember I got goosebumps in the theater from watching that movie, and I know everyone in the theater, I saw it like almost, I think, the day after it debuted, and the theater was so loud during certain parts of the movie. And if you guys haven't gone to see that, if you guys are fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you guys are missing out. You guys need to go see that movie.
Did you see it on the opening weekend?
Yeah, I did see it opening weekend,
cool.
and it was impossible to get tickets.
So I have a little bit of a story to tell, and then I'll kind of give my response to everything that you just said. So I started watching the Marvel movies when everyone else did, right? I saw Iron Man in theaters. I saw everything up until about Ant-Man when it came out, either in theaters or shortly after with my buddies. Okay, so around Ant-Man, I stopped watching. I just didn't care. I don't know, maybe those are my reckless college years, but I really just fell out of it. And I realized when all this Endgame stuff happened that I'm missing out on something. So over the past 2 or 3 weeks, I have binged every Marvel movie since Ant-Man, which isn't the most someone could do, but it's a considerable amount. And I was fairly impressed with everything that's gone on since then. I didn't like Infinity War was the one before this.
Yeah, Infinity War is the one before
I didn't not like Infinity War. I don't think it was a bad movie. I think it was a good movie. But I think I can spoil this one. The snap at the end and all that didn't impress me at all because, I've seen memes on Twitter. I've done, enough stuff to kind of have that ruined for me. So all of that had happened, and I wasn't so impressed with Infinity War because it was so go, go, go. I think the first scene of Infinity War is... I think the first scene of Infinity War is Thor getting his ass beat, right?
I think so. I'm trying to remember back, but
it's basically a big fight scene the entire movie, correct?
Yeah. It's a very long fight scene throughout the entire movie.
And a lot of people really enjoyed that, but that's great, but that's not my kind of movie. And this kind of goes into what you were saying about how there's that hour at the beginning of this movie that is entirely exposition that kind of rewrites everything that you thought you knew, right? If we're making a callback to the Game of Thrones people who had their theories, I bet a bunch of people, even though there's comic book lore to go back on, their theories were smashed by that first hour of the movie, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's really it's kind of up in the air. I mean, people but about the first hour of the movie. A lot of people were just a lot of people didn't have of the movie. It really wasn't. It was just a personal thing for me, is the fact that I was really more upset with the first hour of the movie and how it kind of felt like it dragged on. There were pieces that they didn't really need, but some people enjoyed those pieces, and I think that's great. I think everyone's experience with the movie is different, and that's kind of what the movies are all about. Some people are going to be happy with certain things, and other people aren't. It's just kind of how the movies go. So
yeah, but okay. So the first hour of that movie, I think that's for lack of a better term, and I consider myself one of these, the nerds. That's for us, right? That's for the nerds, the geeks, whatever you want to call us, the people who are super invested in this stuff and, want as much content as you can possibly give them. And when you're a movie franchise and not like a television show, I don't think an extra hour is too much. And then I caught myself struggling in the theater. Unlike you, I saw it 3 weeks after it came out. I just saw it this week. So the theater was mostly empty. There wasn't a lot of cheering. There wasn't a lot of clapping. My roommate was with me. She's never seen any of these movies or cared about them. So me and my friend were explaining things to her in the middle of it. So it was a very different scenario. But I found myself checking my iPhone during the 2-hour period of the movie thinking, damn, there's another hour of this. I'm out of popcorn. My icy's long gone. So I'm not sure if this is going to get good. And that's right about when that big fight scene starts. And I think that fight scene, without spoiling anything, gives you everything that you wanted, right? Like that is your,
absolutely.
That's your big dramatic, like, here you go. You want to see everybody just go at the bad guys at the best possible time? There you go. It was beautiful, right? That kind of sucked me right back in. And then the last hour of the movie, it came and went like a second, and I found myself, as the credits rolled, wishing that I could see some more. And I know there's no credit ending clip like there is in other Marvel movies, but did you catch the little soundbite that they played at the end of the movie?
Yeah, I did. I think that was a nice added touch, and we're not going to jump into that too much because that spoils a big part of the movie. We don't really want to. Yeah. We don't want to touch on that. But there was a really cool thing at the very end. Stay through the credits. The credit scene's actually really cool. There's no credit scene itself, but
especially the main credits. They
especially
kind of
the main
do like
credits.
a little.
That's really cool.
They do a big presentation for really all of the big characters that have been with the Marvel Cinematic Universe over the past decade or so. And that was if the rest of the movie didn't give you goosebumps or get you teary, that definitely did. So yeah, look for the soundbite again at the end of the credits, because it's a nice little callback to everything that's kind of happened so far. And I'm excited to see what the next phase brings, because there's no doubt this is what will be looked back as the beginning of a great big plan. So we've been lucky enough to see it unfold now, so we're lucky enough to see it continue. Any more thoughts on Avengers?
Yeah, I know there's a little plug in there that you wanted to include. It was one that I thought it was a little bit lame product placement, but one thing that we did want to mention was
it does segue into another thing that you wanted to talk about. So
yeah, okay, absolutely.
So one of the things that got me into the whole Avengers thing was I play Fortnite a lot on Xbox. So if you like playing Fortnite, you know that they've had a lot of little gimmicks and game modes that include Thanos or the Avengers and stuff like that. So that's kind of what propelled me into it. But one of the things that they're running now is John Wick, because the new John Wick movie is coming out, and I know you want to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. The new John Wick movie came out. John Wick, the third installment, I believe. The first, I haven't seen it yet. Really good though. I really enjoyed the first one. I know. Seen it. It's fairly new still, so
without spoiling any of it, because I've only been this just recently got brought to my attention. I've been told that the John Wick series is absolutely incredible, and it's something that really good, a person like me should definitely check out. And if anything, what I've been told is that pretty much any shot of it you could pause, take a picture of, and frame it, because the cinematography is just kind of breathtaking. But without spoiling things, can you kind of give us the little breakdown of what the John Wick series is and why we should check out at least the third one, if not the first two?
So the John Wick, without kind of spoiling anything, I guess the John Wick character it sort of came into. If you guys are familiar with Keanu Reeves, I mean, just a really good actor, just really, really good. He's in, I believe, The Matrix was. I don't know if that was necessarily his debut, but
it was the big one.
Yeah, it was the big one. It was his big movie that he was in. And
you're showing your age, Chase.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I know.
Chase is 12 years old. If you guys didn't know.
Yeah. But basically, John Wick is played by Keanu Reeves. He's sort of like a hitman in the series, and it's just kind of a weird story. Like the reason he becomes a hitman is
I
kind
heard
of
people
weird...
just kind of steal his crap and he goes on rampages. Is that
yeah?
true?
It's really like that. Like it's a very silly reason for why he just goes on a rampage.
So it's an action movie for the sake of action.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an action movie. It's full of action. If you're a big action movie fan, love the movie. It's really good.
What's the gore level like? Because if you go to see like an Avengers type deal, the gore isn't too heavy, and it's really the story. And like, there's not that much. There's a big fight scene, but there's not like massive amounts of fighting. This one, I take it, is more intense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like obviously there's a lot of weaponry used, but I wouldn't really necessarily say it's like gory. It was just it's more intense.
No gratuitous blood or limbs getting chopped off. I know you don't watch Game of Thrones, but they really like to show you someone get beheaded and what it would actually look like if someone lost their head in front of you.
Yeah, it's nothing crazy like that, but there is there's some gunshots and stuff like that, which is nothing really. It's nothing super violent, but they really kind of make you capture the hitman feel of Keanu Reeves and his character of John Wick. So I really think if that's it's a series that you should definitely look into. If it's the original John Wick
for
movie.
3 movies, so
exactly.
It's got to be worth something, especially like you said for those action fans that no doubt are listening to this. I mean, yeah, it sounds like the perfect movie for them. Gratuitous
absolutely.
killing.
And there's a couple more. There's one more movie before. It's actually 2 movies, and I wanted to kind of talk about each side of the movie because I thought this was a parallel that I saw. I wanted to talk about a little bit of the Detective Pikachu movie that came out and how it parallels to the new Sonic the Hedgehog movie that is coming out.
Oh wow! I knew you were gonna bring up Detective Pikachu, but I didn't know you were gonna bring up Sonic, and I'm actually very glad you did.
So the comparison here, both if you don't know anything about either CGI and stuff like that to bring these characters to life, and a lot of people are saying the way that Detective Pikachu handled it was really good. I personally really love the character design Detective Pikachu. Maybe that's someone who grew up with the franchise.
Looks like Pikachu. I mean, it's got
it does. It really
realistic type fur, but it's supposed to be an electric rodent, right? So
yeah,
it's supposed to have mouse-like features.
So if anyone's not familiar with what the movie's about, it's not based on any of the main series games. It's actually a spin-off game that's super popular in Japan. It came out in the US pretty recently. The game is called Detective Pikachu. And so that's basically what the movie is a spin-off about.
Are you big into Pikachu? Not Pikachu, Pokemon, Chase?
I used to be. I mean, it was one of my favorite things when I was a kid, and I just thought I never played the Detective Pikachu games, but I thought it was interesting that they were finally the film they chose to bring it to theaters with, like in the sort of live action sort of CGI role, and I really liked the way they did it. Ryan Reynolds is absolutely fantastic as Pikachu in that movie. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is going to be a kids movie." Seriously, it's not just a kids movie. Excellent story. I think if you have kids yourself, I think you will really enjoy taking your kids to go see this. And even if you don't have kids,
with Ryan Reynolds in it, is it okay for kids to go see with their parents?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there are some. I think it is there is some adult jokes, like with Ryan Reynolds in it. The adult, he does make a lot of adult jokes.
Yeah, it's Ryan Reynolds.
But I still think it's targeted and aimed towards kids.
Okay.
I think it's a very kid and adult friendly movie.
As Pokemon should be.
Absolutely, as Pokemon should be. Exactly.
Okay, so,
I think it was a good introduction into that kind of area.
So you talked about how they brought Pikachu to life.
Yeah.
Now Sonic.
So there was a lot of controversy going about this.
Man.
Just so many people were complaining about the almost creepy design of Sonic. They said it just looks nothing like the character. If you saw anything of the trailers, he had almost human-like teeth, which people were just like,
That was
so
cringy,
turned off about.
for sure.
It was so bad. Yeah, it just wasn't good. There's a lot of good actors in it. I really think that Jim Carrey, is going to be really good in that role. I think he plays that role
Dr.
really well.
Eggman, right?
Yeah, Dr. Eggman. And it's kind of like he sort of plays that almost like Ace Ventura type role in that movie. Like that's kind of like the character he's sort of channeling, I think, for this movie. And I think it fits really well. It's that good, classic Jim Carrey character that everyone kind of knows and loves. And it's great to see him kind of getting back in and taking on like this, because I know he's been kind of all over the place in terms of his health.
Well,
and
he's been doing those paintings, political paintings,
Yeah.
Those are fun.
So he's been kind of all over the place in his mental state, but it's good to finally see him back and starring in a big movie like this. But I know a lot of people had complaints. The actual movie director went in and basically was like, we're redesigning the character, it's undergoing redesigns, and I think that's just a bad sign as a franchise.
That
like
movement
a lot of
started on Twitter.
Yeah, it did. It really did.
The
There
power of the
were a lot of
internet,
rumors
man.
going.
Who knew Twitter would be such a dominant thing when it was invented?
Yeah, exactly. But there was a lot of rumors saying that the people who were making this movie, like the directors, they pushed this weird Sonic, and they always had a backup plan in progress. Like they always had like a backup design. And that was kind of a weird theory that I heard, but I really just think that they really weren't expecting it. Like they actually just fell flat on their face and just completely screwed this Sonic up, and they're actually redesigning it.
Well, what's funny is that, I mean, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't a matter of they couldn't do it, because you saw all of these with some background in graphic arts and stuff like that, and they fixed Sonic really quickly.
They made it look
really quickly. I mean, just by shortening his torso and giving him those signature long legs, which he's a fast guy, so
and the eyes too make him bigger.
Yeah, and getting rid of those teeth. There's some
those horrific
quick
teeth,
changes that I don't think are gonna. Thank God it's all CGI and they didn't have some weird. Imagine if Yoda didn't look right in the original Star Wars. That's just a puppet. Like, there wasn't effects. So it's good that they can fix it. But I mean, what a total botch! Just down to the last thing with that, when you have to go restart a character design.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things, and I think I was just so surprised because I think the actual original creator or co-creator of Sonic actually tweeted out, quoted the tweet that they were redoing the design. He was like, "Oh, thank you for all the fan support. We're so happy about the community." And the co-creator of Sonic is calling out the community for the fact that they initiated a change of the look of the character, meaning he probably didn't like the look, and the fact that that's not a very good reflection of Sega or the movie directors towards it. But there was a lot of mess behind that. Let's hope they kind of fix that. And but that's sort of my take on the different movies. I think that's one way how CG can either go really good or really bad. So that was kind of our entertainment news for the week.
I like that we did an entertainment segment for Story 3, because we are Michigan Sports and Entertainment, and we don't always get to talk about stuff like this. But with the sports kind of being slow at the time, it is a good opportunity, and I think we're going to do it again.
Absolutely. So, and now we're gearing in a different entertainment. We're going to jump into some wrestling news that we've heard. So I've heard actually a lot of news about AEW. Do you want to kind of give a rundown about what's going on with them?
Yeah. So AEW, if you don't know what Chase is talking about, is All Elite Wrestling. There's a group of wrestlers that call themselves the Elite. They've had a YouTube show for about 2 years called Being the Elite. So if you haven't checked that out, go check it out. It's definitely worth rewatching all of it. It'll take some bit of a time commitment, but it really is a great series. But yeah, so the Elite used to wrestle with not an independent promotion, but a smaller promotion than WWE, Ring of Honor, who paired with the Japanese promotion New Japan Pro Wrestling. I know I'm throwing a lot of things at everyone right now, but it's important for the story. So basically, the Elite kind of got their own independent fame, and they ran a somewhat independent show with the help of New Japan, or at least Ring of Honor, last year, called All In. And All In sold out 10,000 seats within 30 minutes, which has never been done before by anyone other than the WWE. Yes, so this isn't just something that was, this has been a long time in the making, and there's a lot of work that's been put into it, and it's been ridiculously successful. But now it's kind of breaking into the major leagues, right? Because WWE has pretty much been the only major televised wrestling promotion since the Monday Night Wars ended in the early 2000s when Vince McMahon bought WCW. That used to be on Turner. So 18 years later, we have All Elite Wrestling, AEW, returning or bringing wrestling back to TNT after 18 years. They just signed their deal. They announced it last Wednesday. They weren't just part of the upfronts. If you don't know what upfronts are, it's kind of what big like NBC, the company, right? For their upfronts, they show everything that's going to be on USA and all of their other networks, and things like Monday Night Raw, which is on the USA Network, are pushed very heavily. So they were on the Turner upfronts, and pushed strongly as a big thing. So the big takeaway from this is now they're not just getting a TV deal, like, oh yeah, we'll put wrestling on TV and see how it goes. These people believe that now is the time to bring wrestling back. So this could be a second golden age, or whatever you want to call it, of wrestling. But this is going to be something that is prominent on Turner. You have there's dream scenarios from wrestling fans of Charles Barkley and Shaq and Kenny talking about AEW in the middle of a TNT broadcast of NBA. So Chase, how'd you hear about this? Because I'm glad that it's breaking through to the somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so I actually heard about this. I used to be a little bit into wrestling and more of the WWE, and I've kind of gotten away from it. But one of the wrestlers I actually really liked before I kind of stopped watching, he's gone by a lot of names in the WWE, but his name was Neville. And now he's sort of transitioned into the independent scene, and he now goes by Pac, is I guess his name in the independent scene. And I actually heard about
this. Originally his name before he signed with WWE.
Okay, so that's clearly something I didn't know before.
That's okay.
Yeah,
we're not here to shame. I'm just here to, in case there's some wrestling fan listening out there who's like, well, actually, I got to give him his voice.
Yeah, so I heard about this a little bit, because I still try to follow a little bit, stay in touch with it, because I know Independence is exciting, and I've heard about AEW in this new show, Double or Nothing, and I thought that was interesting. But his match with Hangman Page actually got canceled, and I heard about this because of a couple of news sites. I believe it was What Culture Wrestling that I heard it from. Yeah. Shout out to What Culture Wrestling. They're really good. They do a lot of good program there. It kind of depends. They've definitely fallen off since I used to watch it. They
used to have some really good wrestling content.
They used to have some really good wrestling content. It's definitely gone downhill, but they're working on. I still decently watch their content, even though I'm not in tune with the wrestling kind of world. But I heard about that match through the match being canceled through them. I know there was a lot of rumors saying the fact that I know that Pac didn't really want to take the fall because he's the champion with another division or whatever they call them, the organization. Yeah, so, and then I guess they wanted Hangman Page to win the match, and he just didn't really want to take the fall. So that's the rumor, at least that I heard. Really. But
okay,
that's just the rumor that I heard.
Let me clarify, right? Because I think Pac deserves a little bit, at least some clarification. So
for sure.
You mentioned Double or Nothing, so I didn't actually mention that in my little overview of AEW because there's so much to cover. I did mention All In, which was last year. Double or Nothing is next weekend on Memorial Day, or the Saturday before Memorial Day weekend in Las Vegas. They're doing another StarCast event. Actually, one of our writers, Dustin Whitehead, will be there. So that'll be, we'll hopefully get some interesting content, and I'll at least be able to do a podcast with him on that. But yeah, so Double or Nothing is the second pay-per-view that is being done by this group, and it's being considered the first major event for All Elite Wrestling because it's not co-branded with ROH's support. So yeah, Double or Nothing is happening, and one of probably the biggest match that they've been pushing, other than maybe the Kenny Omega Chris Jericho fight, is Pac versus Adam Hangman Page. And what's happened is, yes, it's been called off, but what was reported was that it was called off because of they couldn't reach an agreement over the booking of it, right? So if you don't know, wrestling's fake. Everything is predetermined. I had to burst the bubble for someone who might be listening like, oh, what do you mean? Wrestling's fake. They predetermine everything, but it still hurts, so it's not that fake. But it's not that Pac didn't want to take the pin in this particular match, okay? He is the champion of Dragon Gate, which is a Japanese
Dragon
promotion.
Gate, yes, that's what it was.
So he's the Dragon Gate champion, and at the time that they were booking this match, they figured, okay, Pac's going to be the Dragon Gate champion for a little bit, and then, they'll move on and do something else, because it's just like he's free from WWE, let's do the thing. That's not what Dragon Gate's doing. Dragon Gate apparently has some long-term booking thing that really couldn't let him get involved in an entire feud and series that makes him look bad, right? Because if the champion of a promotion looks bad in the series, so it wasn't necessarily this fight, right? Like he was always, I believe the story is he was always going to take the fall at Double or Nothing, but that because of the continued storyline that was proposed, there was just no real good way to work it out that would have worked out down the line. So instead of doing this and kind of making it, there's an inappropriate word that we use in the wrestling industry for this, a screwy finish to end the match. If they did a screwy finish to end the match, it would seem illegitimate, and that's not what All Elite Wrestling is going for on Turner. They're going for wins and losses matter, a more sports-oriented rather than entertainment feel for wrestling. So it's probably in the best interest of AEW that they cancel this match. It's it sucks for a lot of fans because, this was going to be an awesome match, and I don't know if you saw the video. They decided to do this screwy finish in a match somewhere, I think across seas in Europe or something, but I could be wrong. But they did it at an independent show, a smaller one, and you could see the fans they knew Pac Neville was there, but when Adam Hangman Page was coming out, they didn't believe it was him, even though his name and the words were up on the screen. Everyone was like craning their necks to see if it was going to be him that was going to walk out of the curtains, And I think when you have something like that happening, it means Adam Hangman Page is a superstar. So while Pac won't be part of AEW for the foreseeable future, that's the way it looks, Adam Hangman Page is a legit superstar and a much better guy than I had previously thought to lead the company, or to be at least in the upper echelon of the company. So that's kind of the story on that. Yes, there was some dispute, but it's not like Pac was just going to say, hey, I'm not going to lie down for you. It was, my organization's really not going to like a story that I look bad for a couple of months and then look good and then look bad again. It's more along that line. So it's the wrestling business. It's just a really bad time for this to happen. AEW has said that this has opened up booking opportunities and that they think that they're going to get him a suitable opponent that will actually be better than the match against Pac. Now, the only person that comes to mind is Jon Moxley, who is probably better known as Dean Ambrose on WWE.
Yes, I've heard about that. Yeah,
he was released at the end of April. Typically with WWE contracts, there's a 90-day stipulation afterwards where you can't work for a different company for 3 months afterwards. Who knows? They gave Dean Ambrose a big farewell, kind of a big goodbye. So maybe they waived that. It would be kind of weird that they would waive that to go let him work with the quote unquote enemy. But that's kind of what's going on. So if it turns out to be Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley / Dean Ambrose, that would definitely probably be better than Pac. But other than that, pretty bummed. Anything else on wrestling?
I think that's about it. But that if there was a match between Jon Moxley and Hangman Page, that would definitely kind of get me to tune in, especially as a non-outsider. I think especially as someone who is more of a fan and kind of knows who Dean Ambrose is. I think that kind of will draw
the WWE.
Exactly. It brings that audience in. I think that's a good thing. I think having guys like this from WWE moving into the independent scene, like Cody Rhodes moving into things like AEW and stuff like that, and guys like Chris Jericho also coming in, it's really good for, I think, for the independent scene and for them
Chris
to kind of build
Jericho's
that competition.
Deal, but I mean, yeah, it's absolutely great. I just, like I said, I would warn people who are, anxious or getting excited about John Moxley maybe appearing at AEW. I doubt it. Like I said, WWE was really nice to him when he said, "I want to go." And as much as I'd like to think that they'd waive that little contract stipulation to work for the enemy, I doubt it. So, yeah, that's... Oh, Money in the Bank was last night. I did fall asleep during it. I think I mentioned that earlier when we were talking about Game of Thrones. So, yeah, I haven't seen Money in the Bank. I do know what happens. Some cool things are going on. Becky Lynch was the double champ. Not anymore. You can watch a show to kind of find out exactly what happened. There was a surprise reemergence of Brock Lesnar in the main event of the show. A lot of people are angry about that, but that's what a good heel kind of does. So yeah, Money in the Bank. Maybe next week I'll give a better review on it because I really haven't checked it out yet.
All right, so I think now that we are finished with wrestling, we can transition to the final story, which I know is a little bit old news, but I still want to cover it because there's still a lot of stuff that's being talked about. Is the Detroit Lions NFL draft. I know there's been a lot of drama kind of around a lot of the picks that have happened in the NFL draft, and there's a lot of things we want to dive into. So, I know you weren't super involved in the NFL draft, but I kind of want to hear.
Well, okay, let's not throw me under the bus on there, Chase. Jesus, I like a good Lions fan. I paid attention to the first round. We took a tight end, or I shouldn't say we. I know that's a pet peeve of many. The Lions took a tight end, and that was enough for me to see. I wasn't necessarily upset with the pick. I was upset with Lions Twitter kind of blowing up and getting furious. So I decided the draft was not something I had the time, because I was working also, to focus on. So I put down my phone and I continued to work throughout the weekend. And I have seen the list of people the Lions have picked. I don't think it's bad. I think we have some late. I think they have some late great picks. I don't know how to say his last name, but it starts with an O.
I'll dive into that a little bit later.
Oruwariye. I have no idea.
Oruwariye is how you pronounce it.
I have no disrespect to him. It's just a tough name. But yeah, no. So I paid attention a little bit to this draft, and I guess my comments go toward the TJ Hawkinson pick. I like Hawkinson. I watched some tape on him at Iowa. He's just a good tight end. They were lauding him as one of the best tight end picks. What was the comparison? Best tight end draft pick since Vernon Davis.
Yes, since Vernon Davis. Yeah, since Vernon Davis, there was been a lot of comments. Drastic, but I know a lot of people have been saying he's comparable to Gronk. A lot of people are saying he's the next generational tight end in the NFL.
Yeah, so I thought it was a good pick, and obviously, if you know anything about the Lions or Lions Twitter universe, they do not like the last tight end that the Lions selected in the first round, which was Eric Ebron. Who has since left and done very well with the Colts and has not seemed to forget his time with Detroit. And Detroit has definitely not forgot his time there. And they love to rib each other on the internet. And it is one of the most toxic relationships I've ever seen that does not need to exist. But it does. And immediately people started tagging Eric Ebron and saying, "Oh, TJ Hawkinson next to Eric Ebron, stupid Lions." Yeah, calm down. He's not Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron's not a bad player. He just didn't work out in Detroit. He's working out elsewhere, and Hawkinson will likely work out in Detroit. You know what I mean? I made this comment around the draft that if it were... Who was the last... I guess Brandon Pettigrew was before.
Yes, Brandon Pettigrew was the one before.
Before Brandon Pettigrew, was that Tony Scheffler?
Well, I'm not 100% sure about that. It might have been, but
whatever.
I don't know. He wasn't a first.
Well, okay, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying if you went to that tight end era of Detroit Lions football, coming off of a guy like a Pettigrew or a Scheffler or something, right? Hawkinson would be like, "Oh, great, we got the next guy. Like, he's going to fill in and be an automatic improvement." But because Eric Ebron's toxic relationship has just infected the Lions community, this pick was doomed from the minute they selected it, and I commend I commend Quinn for making the pick because, you got to have balls to do that in Detroit. So, I'm sure you have a more analytical approach to this. What do you think about Hawkinson as a pick?
Personally, I love the T.J. Hawkinson pick, and I've been a big defender of the Hawkinson pick. I'm not one to necessarily judge too heavily on draft picks before they play in the NFL because that's a little unfair. But let me tell you, this guy's a lot more special than Eric Ebron. I don't really like the Eric Ebron, comparisons. There's nothing wrong with Eric Ebron. I think it's great, good for him. All the success to him, hopefully in his career in Indianapolis. But to me, it's a new era. Really, it is. I think they're ready for a breath of fresh air. And T.J. Hawkinson, he opens up the field. He's a big target in the middle of the field. It opens up, the rest of the field. He'll basically force 1-on-1 to outside receivers, so that'll open up more 1-on-1 competition for both Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. They'll win contested catches most of the time. It's going to be good. It's literally Matthew Stafford's going to have a heyday next year, hopefully, after his down year last year.
He
can cross your fingers, but yeah, he does. He definitely needs an improvement. I think you can expect a big year out of T.J. Hawkinson and Kenny Golladay. Personally, I think they're gonna. I love Kenny Golladay.
Marvin Jones, is he no longer on the team?
No, he still is with the team.
Okay,
He's still with the team.
That's
so yeah,
they still got the deep threat. I guess Golladay is also a deep threat, but
yeah, absolutely.
I feel like a poor man's Calvin Johnson, where he can kind of also play the slot and use his big body to get into places and force catches and stuff. And you have
lot of people
T.J.
call
Hawkinson.
Yeah.
How does he? One thing I haven't really looked into is how does he project? Which the other half of playing the tight end position when you're not receiving is blocking. How is he there?
He's an excellent blocker. I mean, he's been comped. Like I said, a lot of people compare him to Rob Gronkowski because
like
of his blocking. He does. He's very big. I mean,
except when he's moving.
Yeah, exactly. He's 6'5". I think 230 are his metrics, and
it's a whole lot
he's
of
great
man.
blocking tight end. Yeah, it's a big man.
That's a whole lot of man.
So yeah, he's a great blocker. I think a more better suitable comparison for me in the NFL is George Kittle. He's also out of Iowa last year. If you haven't noticed, George Kittle broke the record for most receiving yards in a single season by a tight end. Fantastic season from him. He had a battle a little bit with Kelsey for the leader in receiving yards. We ended up actually topping Kelsey last year for receiving yards. Iowa has produced some insane tight ends. If you haven't noticed,
they're a factory.
It was George Kittle last year, and then this year it was T.J. Hawkinson went to 8 to the Lions, and then at 20, Noah Fant went to the Denver Broncos in the first round. And while he's not necessarily expected to be as good as his teammate T.J. Hawkinson, he's still going to be a very reliable
first-round tight end.
Exactly, still a first-round tight end. He'll make an impact. He was the deep threat at tight end for Iowa. He'll be a great addition to the Denver Broncos roster. Whatever in the world's going on over there, they got Joe Flacco over there, quarterback, which I'm not
what they're doing.
Super confident about. But, like I said, so I think I really like the Hawkinson pick. I know a lot of people were saying, oh, they should have gone defense, and they don't like with the history of first-round tight end for the Lions, it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths.
Jonathan
it really
Allen
does,
got taken off the board by Jacksonville. One pick before Detroit.
Yeah.
Selected.
Unfortunately, Josh Allen did go off the board. Yeah.
Josh
Allen.
Josh, not Josh.
No, you're okay. You're okay. Josh Allen did go off the board to Jacksonville at 7, which was a surprise because no one expected him to fall that far. I mean, Josh was probably, in my opinion, he was the best pass rusher in the draft. I put him ahead of Joey Bosa.
Do you?
Yeah, I actually did because. Is it no Nick Bosa?
Nick is they're so confusing.
Yeah,
Nick or Joey?
Nick is. I think Joey is the one.
I went to middle school with one of them.
Yeah, Joey Bosa is already in the. I think Joey Bosa's already. Bosa is the brother who just got drafted.
Okay.
I'm mixing up the two. But anyway, so Nick Bosa. Yeah, so I thought he was better than Nick Bosa because of his injury concerns. Bosa's, that is. I mean, both him and his brother have struggled with injury. He struggled with injury at Ohio State. It's just going to happen. Like, that's just how it is. So I thought that Josh Allen was a little bit more of a complete prospect in terms of not being as injury prone. I know he.
Do you think that if he doesn't get selected by Jacksonville, do you think the Lions go that way?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like they. Not Nick Bosa, excuse me, Josh Allen there. I feel like Josh Allen was too big of a prospect to pass up. And I feel like if Josh Allen hadn't been on the board for Jacksonville, I feel like their pick would have been T.J. Hawkinson for sure.
Fair,
I feel like they definitely would have taken him before the Lions if Josh Allen was off the board. I don't even know
who's playing tight end for them, honestly.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you either. But
the days
a lot of
Mercedes
people were saying
Lewis come to mind, but I know that's
exactly. But exactly my point, and that's the thing. They really need a tight end, so there were a lot of other who wanted tight end, and I think Hawkinson fits a good role. I know a lot of people were saying they wanted the kid from Houston, Ed Oliver, who went to Buffalo.
That was the one
pick.
I was going to say, that I think of the people left on the board, most people that are upset with the Hawkinson pick feel that Ed Oliver should have been selected.
Absolutely, but for me, I think it's one of those things where I don't really think he would have fit the defense very well. I did like Ed Oliver pick. I liked Brian Burns a little bit more as an edge prospect. I think I had Josh Allen, Nick Bosa, Brian Burns, who went at 16 to the Panthers, and then Ed Oliver was right underneath there. Just because he didn't personally fit the scheme, I thought Brian Burns and Josh Allen fit in the scheme a little bit better, but that's besides the point. None of them went to the Lions. The Lions picked T.J. Hawkinson. I think it's a great pick.
Why do you think Lions fans were so rabid to get an edge rusher?
Well, because
they just signed Flowers, correct?
Yeah, they just signed Flowers, but I mean, they wanted a really long pass rushing sense on the other side, because there are others. Don't get me wrong, they have Romeo on the other side, who's a great addition. He had 7 sacks, I believe, last year, but he really was, I think, in terms of PFF grade, he actually had one of the worst grades in terms of pressuring the quarterback. So it's
Who do they
tough.
have in the middle?
They've got a great presence in the middle. They have Ashawn Robinson, Damon Snacks Harrison, and then Deshaun Hand in the middle as well.
So you have 1 weak spot on your front four.
Yes, you have 1 weak spot.
I very much feel that Lions fans overrated the necessity for them to get an edge rusher. I don't think it was number one ever on the Lions board.
That's an interesting. I think it was number one before they signed Trey Flowers. The signing of Trey Flowers was a big
obviously
addition.
the signing of Trey Flowers is I'm talking about post the Flowers.
Yeah,
signing.
post Trey Flowers. Okay,
with the loss of Ansa, and even though he hasn't been great, or what he was hyped to be, the loss of Ansa, and not having a Flowers or anyone else, that definitely was number one on the board. But once they got an elite edge rusher, I don't think the need, in a solid guy in Damon Harrison. So I just don't think it was that big a deal. But Lions fans will get upset over most things.
No, I mean absolutely. That's a great point, and I think solidify that defense and. Adding that second edge rusher to go across from Flowers, I think people were just like, oh yeah, like the idea of it. I think they like the idea of solidifying the defense more than that, but I really think that T.J. Hawkinson will open up things for the offense. I think the number one thing we're going to...
He
will.
Absolutely. That's what the Lions are... Right. So on offense, right, the Lions probably needed 2 things, okay? More targets for Matthew Stafford and more time for Matthew Stafford, okay? Under duress too much, throwing the ball when he shouldn't have been throwing it, making bad passes, things like that, and then he gets all of the blame. Now you bring in a guy like Hawkinson who can block it well and he can catch well. It's not like Eric Ebron. I hate to harken back to that, but Eric Ebron was, a giant wide receiver more or less.
But he wasn't a block. He wasn't a blocker.
That's what I mean. Is you have a giant wide receiver. Like you don't put a big wide receiver at tight end because they don't know how to block on the plays that they're not the focal point, right? So now you give more blocking. You give that line who's young and they're gonna grow. You give them a little more help. You give Stafford a little bit more time, and suddenly those long, deep passes that he likes to a guy like Kenny Golladay or Marvin Jones, those are gonna connect more.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
This, in my opinion, is a very, very smart pick, but let's not waste all of our time on T.J. Hawkinson because I'm sure that's been belabored many times over. What about this second-round pick? There's a little bit of a split decision amongst the fans on that one, too.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people hate on this pick, and I think it's a little unfortunate because honestly, I'm going to be completely honest, I have never heard of this kid. This kid wasn't on my radar. This is Jelani Tavai out of Hawaii. It's Jelani Tavai out of Hawaii. It's such a fun thing, little word to say. I don't know. It's like a little fun little phrase. But yeah, I mean, this is someone who was kind of a mediocre linebacker out of college. Obviously, wasn't playing big competition and over in Hawaii, and it's just tough.
Hey, don't sleep on Hawaii. I know it best as a UCF guy with what's his name, Mackenzie Milton. They produce some great talent. So
like I said, I'm not knocking the pick. Like I said, I'm not a person who is going to criticize a pick too much before they play a snap in the NFL because I think Tavai fits the scheme really well. And I know, hearing it, but seriously, he does fit in that kind of scheme, and he's a Patriot-type player. I know the Patriots were interested in drafting him. I know there were a couple other teams who were interested as well, so I do think that maybe this could turn out to be a steal. I really don't know, but I know a lot of people were saying this guy was available to pick on day 3. I do personally think that this is a poor value pick, but I'll get into the reason why it's justified a little bit later. But overall, I think it's a solid linebacker pick. I think it fits their scheme well. I just think he'll be a solid addition. I mean, they needed linebacker, fit right into that kind of role. He'll kind of take the Christian Jones style role in their defense, which is good. They'll kind of have that that middle linebacker that they need, and then it'll allow them to move Jared Davis to outside linebacker, allow him to rush, open him up a little bit more, and do the things that he is more comfortable doing in that defense. And I think that'll open up the defense as well. I think Jared Davis will be a big pass rusher next season, which would be really good. Especially after losing Eli Harold last year at outside linebacker. I can't remember exactly where he signed, but Jared Davis will definitely serve as that kind of almost rocket on the outside. I mean, he'll be a really good, piece, to the pass rushing game. So I think overall, while there was a little bit of an issue with the value there for Vi, I think it's a good pick. Jumping into some of the later picks, Amani Oruwariye, which I know you were having a tough time pronouncing earlier.
I hope you're wrong. I mean, maybe I'm spoiling your take, but I hope you're wrong in that this guy isn't as great as you think he is, because I do not want to have to pronounce his name all season.
But Amani Oruwariye is a little tough for me to even. This kid was out of Penn State. He was projected day 1. He was a end of day 1, borderline early day 2 guy. So for them to get him in the 5th round, I think he's the absolute steal of the draft. I mean, this guy comes in. Fall? That's a big question. A lot of people don't really know why he fell. I think there's a lot of kind of pity excuses the reasons why he fell.
Need-based stuff usually.
Exactly. Yeah, need-based stuff. Like, I feel like it was unfortunate the fact that because we saw guys like Greedy Williams fall really far as well, and a lot of people were so upset the fact that the Lions didn't take Greedy Williams. But hear me out. I'm serious. They got one of the biggest steals in the draft with Amani Oruwariye. Such a good corner out of Penn State. If you watch any of his tape, seriously, I recommend it.
You're not
watch
the only
these
person
guys.
that I've heard say this. I believe there's definitely some backing to this, and
yeah, absolutely. So. I think it was the biggest steal out of any other team. Like, I don't really think there's any. You might be able to point some stuff out to me. You can argue with me on Twitter. In my opinion, I think Oruwariye was the biggest steal to draft by any other team in the NFL. I mean, honestly, the Lions do such a great job with their late round picks. Another one that was really big was Travis Fulgham, wide receiver at Old Dominion. I think he has a chance to get a lot of reps on the offense next year. So those are some of those good value late round picks.
Signed? I know there's still a few.
No, Fulgham did recently sign. The only person who hasn't signed now is Will Harris, who is the safety, their 3rd round pick. But there's usually a lot of confusing language around the 3rd round pick. It's usually the 1st and the 3rd round pick that usually have the toughest time signing because of the language in their contract and the amount of money that they're owed. So I'm sure Will Harris will sign pretty soon because right now they're just an optional spring practices right now. So there's nothing mandatory, and I'm sure he'll sign by the time mandatory practices start. I don't think it'll be a huge issue. It's just minor, little things and little ticks in their contract. So overall, I think it was a pretty solid draft for the Lions. I think this was the year. Bob Quinn did a little bit of fan pleasing the first couple of years. And he was like, oh, wow, they drafted a lot of picks that, a lot of Lions fans like. They had the Kerryon Johnson pick that everyone loved. He's now a fan favorite in Detroit. But I think this year, I think Bob Quinn almost gave everyone the middle finger in Detroit. It was like, I'm drafting how I want to draft. You guys are going to suck it up. These are good picks in my opinion. This is who I'm going with.
Hopefully that works out.
Yeah, and hopefully that works out for them. I mean, I think that's what they're looking for. I think he fits that defense really well. All the picks they made, most of them were heavy defensive, and I'm excited to see. Like I said, in the offense, you'll see Hawkinson and recently signed Jesse James. They'll run in a 2 tight end offense. Darrell Bevel, from the new offensive coordinator who used to coach in Seattle, he loves running a 2 tight end offense, and that's the kind of thing that they'll run a lot. It'll be run heavy. So you're going to see a lot of C.J. Anderson. You're going to see a lot of Kerryon Johnson next season. And I think the opening up of the run game is going to open up the pass game even more. And it's why you saw so much success with Russell Wilson. You're going to see Matthew Stafford, I think, have a Russell Wilson type season. It's going to be pretty run heavy, but he's going to be able to launch a lot of deep threats. I feel like Hawkinson's going to be that sort of bailout guy in the middle, and he's going to open up the one-on-one game for Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, Travis Fulgham. They're going to have a field day, I think, next season. I think Kenny Galladay seriously is one of the most underrated wide receivers going into the next year. He had a great year last year.
That's your fantasy
injury a little
sleeper.
bit. Yep, that's my fantasy sleeper for this year. If you guys are big into fantasy,
He was my fantasy sleeper last year, and he worked out.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, seriously, he will be another great fantasy addition. Seriously, snag him when you can. I've seen him falling a lot in mock, so seriously, grab Kenny Galladay if you can. He will be probably the most successful Lions wide receiver next year. Not Marvin Jones. Nobody else on the roster. Kenny Galladay is the wide receiver 1 in Detroit, and that's, plain and simple. That's my prediction for next year.
All right. Anything else on the lines before we wrap things up, Chase?
I think that's it. Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of sums up the draft. So yeah, I mean that was all the news that we had for this week.
All right, buddy. Well, we're back in action. This recording went along without too many hitches, so I think it's safe to say we are back in the game. We will be here weekly. We hope to record. What do we decide? We're going to record Sundays and put out Monday?
Yeah, that sounds like I think that's the kind of schedule we're going for, so guys. And for the future, most of the time, expect some new episodes day. We're gonna try to get those out as quick as we can. Be sure to check back all summer. We're gonna be releasing stuff. We're gonna make sure that you guys have all the news, staying updated. Even when things are slow, you guys are gonna get a podcast. When things are busy, you guys are gonna get a podcast. Boom! It's gonna be out all the time. You guys are gonna see plenty of us throughout the summer. So be prepared for a bunch of new content coming in.
Yep. All right, great, man. Before we head on out, where can people find you? And you want to plug your little Hockeytown Rundown podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at Chase Sussex on Twitter, SEX on Twitter, and you guys can also be sure to follow the Hockeytown Rundown podcast. If you guys are Red Wings fans, we didn't talk about much about the Red Wings today.
Well,
but
as you put it before we started recording, there's nothing going on.
There's nothing going on with the Red Wings right now because it's the off season, so it's not surprising. But if you guys want to hear all sorts of stuff, you guys are Red Wings, be sure to tune into the Hockeytown Rundown. We actually have a new episode coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. David, where can
Yep, I'm at David Rosenberg on Twitter. That's Rosenberg with an E and 2 G's because someone took the one with 1 G, and that upsets me. But yeah, that's where you can find me. I like to tweet about music, wrestling, lots of wrestling, and politics. So if you're a politics nerd like me, you can definitely get some of that content over from me. Make sure you're following our main sites, Twitter, Michigan Sports and Entertainment. It's at Mich Sports Ent. That's at MICH Sports ENT. And, of course, make sure you follow us at MSE Countdown on Twitter. We're going to be a lot more active on Twitter. We're going to try to build our following, so we appreciate any retweets, likes, comments, quote tweets, anything you want to do. Interact with us, guys. We want to talk to you. We want to know what you want to hear. If you have any thoughts, comments, or concerns, feel free to DM us. Our DMs are open. And with that, we thank you, and we'll talk to you again after a while.
Peace.